Imagine waking up one morning and the sea you fished your entire life is no longer yours. Imagine foreign ships blocking your path home. Imagine watching your family's income disappear while powerful nations play games around you. This is the reality for thousands of Filipino fishermen today. Something is changing in the South China Sea, and it's happening faster than most people realize. Chinese ships are appearing more often, closer to Philippine waters than ever before. Coast Guard vessels face off in tense standoffs that could explode into something much bigger, and at the same time, American patrols are becoming strangely less visible. Is this just a coincidence? Or is something much bigger quietly unfolding right under our noses? Today we're going to uncover what's really happening in these contested waters, and why it could change everything for millions of people across the Indo-Pacific. Right now, as you watch this video, Filipino fishermen are waking up afraid. They don't know if Chinese ships will block their path today. They don't know if water cannons will force them home empty-handed, their nets empty and their families hungry. This nightmare is happening every single week. Chinese Coast Guard vessels patrol closer to Philippine shores, staying longer than before, acting like they own these waters that have belonged to Filipino communities for generations. Philippine ships respond with their own patrols, and both sides circle each other in dangerous games at sea. Radio warnings crackle across the waves as tensions rise with each passing day. Local fishing communities watch their livelihoods disappear, but they have no choice except to keep going out to sea. But this is where things begin to get serious, because what's happening in these remote waters affects the entire world. A Filipino fisherman named Carlos recently described his experience. "They push us away like we don't belong there anymore. But this is where my grandfather fished, where my father fished. Now I'm scared to take my son out there." But the real story goes much deeper than one man's fear. The South China Sea isn't just water between countries, it's the highway of the global economy. And 30% of all world trade passes through these waters every single day. Ships carrying everything from oil to the smartphone in your hand travel through this area. If this route gets blocked or controlled by one country, prices everywhere will explode overnight. But there's something even more valuable hidden beneath these waves. Under the South China Sea lie massive oil and gas reserves worth trillions of dollars, enough to power entire nations for decades. These waters also feed millions of people across Southeast Asia. Filipino, Vietnamese, and Malaysian fishermen depend on these fishing grounds to survive. For China, controlling this area means controlling trade routes to Japan, South Korea, and beyond. For the Philippines, it means protecting their own backyard and their people's way of life. For America, it means keeping sea lanes open for allies and maintaining global trade flow. And for you watching this video, it means the price of everything you buy could change overnight if conflict erupts. But this is only the beginning of why these waters matter so much. China didn't start this expansion with warships or military threats. They started small, and that's what makes their strategy so effective. First, Chinese fishing boats began appearing in disputed areas looking harmless and civilian. Then Coast Guard vessels followed to protect these fishermen from other countries. Next came the construction phase that changed everything. China began building artificial islands on tiny reefs and rocks that were barely visible at high tide. Scarborough Shoal became a Chinese base almost overnight, complete with radar towers and military equipment. The Spratly Islands grew runways long enough for fighter jets and missile systems. Rock formations that used to disappear underwater became permanent military fortresses hosting thousands of soldiers. Today, these artificial islands serve as unsinkable aircraft carriers in the middle of the South China Sea. But the pressure continues at sea level too, and this is where the human cost becomes clear. Chinese ships surround small Filipino fishing boats like wolves circling prey. Water cannons blast fishermen away from their traditional fishing spots where their families have worked for generations. Coast Guard vessels ram Philippine boats, injuring crew members and destroying equipment that families can't afford to replace. At Second Thomas Shoal, Chinese ships constantly harass Philippine Marines who live on a grounded warship to protect Philippine territory. These brave soldiers face daily intimidation, supply blockades, and psychological warfare. But this is not random harassment or bureaucratic confusion. Every move follows a carefully planned strategy that military experts call salami slicing, taking small pieces until you control the whole thing. Here's the question that keeps defense ministers awake at night across the Indo-Pacific. Is China just expanding slowly to claim more fishing grounds, or are they preparing for something much bigger? Military experts who study Chinese behavior see a clear pattern that has worked before and is being repeated now. First, establish presence with civilian boats that look innocent. Second, bring in Coast Guard vessels for law enforcement activities. Third, build permanent structures that can't be removed. Fourth, deploy military assets to defend these new positions. Fifth, declare the entire area under Chinese control and dare anyone to challenge it. This exact playbook worked perfectly in the Paracel Islands, where China now has complete control. It's working in parts of the Spratly Islands, where Chinese military bases grow stronger every month. Now it's being tested near Philippine shores, closer to populated areas than ever before. Each step seems small by itself, just another patrol boat or construction project, but together, they create facts on the water that become impossible to reverse. What starts small often doesn't stay small, and history proves this pattern. Every new patrol boat normalizes Chinese presence in disputed waters. Every artificial island becomes a permanent military base that can project power across the region. Every Filipino fishing boat that gets blocked sends a message to other countries. China decides who can fish where. The question isn't whether China wants control of the entire South China Sea anymore. The question is whether anyone has the will and power to stop them before it's too late. The Philippines faces an impossible choice that no small country should have to make. Fight back against a superpower and risk destruction, or do nothing and lose their own territory piece by piece. But President Marcos and the Filipino people have decided they're not giving up without a fight. Philippine Coast Guard ships now patrol disputed areas daily, often outnumbered but never backing down. They escort Filipino fishermen back to their traditional fishing grounds, creating human shields between Chinese ships and civilian boats. Sometimes, the two Coast Guards play chicken on the high seas, with vessels racing toward each other at full speed until one side turns away at the last second. But here's where the situation becomes dangerous. The Philippine military is also preparing for something much bigger than Coast Guard patrols. They're buying new patrol boats from Japan, building radar stations on remote islands, and training with American forces more often than ever before. Under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, U.S. forces can now use Philippine bases, putting American soldiers closer to the disputed areas than they've been in decades. This sends a clear message to Beijing. Touch the Philippines, and you're touching America too. But the brutal mathematics of this conflict are hard to ignore. The Philippines has 125 million people. China has 4 billion. The Philippine Navy has 24,000 sailors. China's Navy has 250,000. This is David versus Goliath, but with nuclear weapons and global economic consequences. Fortunately for the Philippines, they're not facing this giant alone. A quiet network is forming across the Indo-Pacific, and this is exactly what China wants to prevent. The United States leads joint patrols with Philippine ships, sending a message that America won't abandon its oldest Asian ally. Japanese destroyers sail near disputed islands, remembering their own territorial disputes with China. Indian warships visit Philippine ports, showing solidarity between democracies facing Chinese pressure. Australian submarines patrol international waters nearby, proving that distant allies care about regional stability. These countries share a common fear that keeps their leaders up at night. If China controls the South China Sea, they control everyone who depends on these trade routes. The Quad alliance between America, Japan, India, and Australia meets regularly to coordinate their response. ASEAN countries are also coordinating, despite their usual preference for staying neutral. Vietnam and Malaysia face similar Chinese pressure in their own waters. So they're watching what happens to the Philippines carefully. They know they could be next on China's expansion list. Military exercises happen more often now, with names like Balikatan between America and the Philippines, and Malabar between America, Japan, India, and Australia. These aren't just training exercises anymore, they're sending a message that grows stronger every month. The message is simple but powerful. If China wants to control these waters, they'll have to fight more than just the Philippines. And this is where things become truly dangerous, because cornered powers often make desperate decisions. Beijing is watching every move this growing alliance makes, and Chinese military planners are adapting their strategy accordingly. They see American ships patrolling more frequently. They see Filipino resistance getting stronger. They see the alliance network growing tighter every month. So what will China do next, and how far are they willing to go? Military analysts expect the pressure to increase dramatically in the coming months. More Coast Guard ships will appear in disputed waters, staying longer and acting more aggressively. More artificial islands will sprout military bases, creating permanent facts that can't be undone. China might declare an air defense identification zone over the entire South China Sea, requiring all aircraft to ask Beijing's permission before flying through international airspace. They might increase military exercises near Philippine shores, showing their power and testing American commitment to defend their ally. But here's the scariest possibility that defense experts discuss in private meetings. China might decide to act decisively before the alliance network gets any stronger. History shows this dangerous pattern repeatedly. Rising powers often strike when they feel encircled by enemies. When they see their window of opportunity closing, they sometimes choose war over slow defeat. The question that haunts military planners is timing. Will China wait patiently and grow stronger, or will they move quickly while America is distracted by other global crises? Here's what keeps military commanders awake at night, the scenario they train for but pray never happens. Ships from both sides patrol the same contested waters, with crews on high alert and weapons ready. Radios crackle with increasingly angry warnings. You are in Chinese territorial waters, leave immediately or face consequences. These are Philippine waters protected by international law. You have no authority here. Vessels circle each other in a deadly dance, with young sailors on both sides getting more nervous as tensions rise. Then someone makes a mistake, a miscommunication, a radar malfunction, or just human error under pressure. Maybe a Chinese ship rams a Philippine vessel too hard, or a Filipino sailor opens fire when he thinks he's under attack. Suddenly people are injured or killed in international waters. Both governments blame each other as social media explodes with graphic footage and angry demands for revenge. Politicians face enormous pressure to respond with force, while military leaders try to prevent escalation. This isn't science fiction or Hollywood drama. In 2001, a Chinese fighter jet collided with a US spy plane over the South China Sea, nearly causing a war between nuclear powers. Today there are more ships, more patrols, more chances for deadly accidents. More ways for a small incident between Coast Guard vessels to become a regional war involving multiple nuclear powers. One wrong move at sea, one collision, one injured sailor, and everything could change overnight. Let me tell you about Roberto, a 45-year-old fisherman from Palawan whose story shows what's really at stake here. His family has fished the same waters for 4 generations, following seasonal patterns passed down from father to son. But now Roberto tells his children not to become fishermen like him. "The sea is not ours anymore," he says quietly. "Every day, we don't know if we can fish or if foreign ships will chase us home." Roberto's boat was rammed by a Chinese vessel last month while he was checking his nets. His engine was damaged, and his son's arm was broken in the collision. They couldn't afford repairs for weeks, so his family went hungry while he worked odd jobs on land. This is happening to hundreds of fishing families across the Philippines, but their stories rarely make international news. Yet their struggle represents something much bigger: the human cost of great power competition in the 21st century. If conflict erupts tomorrow, Roberto and thousands like him will lose everything they've ever known. Their fishing grounds will become military zones. Their ancient way of life will disappear as warships replace fishing boats. And the world will suddenly realize that this was never really about rocks and reefs in distant waters. It was always about ordinary people trying to feed their families in a world where superpowers play dangerous games. Imagine waking up tomorrow to news that shooting has started in the South China Sea. Chinese and Philippine ships have collided, sailors are dead, and both governments are mobilizing for war. What happens next would change your life even if you live thousands of miles away. Global shipping routes would shut down immediately as insurance companies refuse to cover vessels entering a war zone. The price of everything from gasoline to electronics would skyrocket within days. Stock markets would crash as investors realized that 30% of global trade just stopped flowing. Countries would have to choose sides between China and the American-led alliance, splitting the world economy in half. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan would face immediate threats to their own security as China consolidates control over regional sea lanes. Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia would lose access to their own fishing grounds and oil reserves. But the human cost would be even more devastating than the economic impact. Millions of fishermen and their families would lose their livelihoods overnight. Coastal communities that have existed for centuries would be forced to relocate as their waters become militarized zones. Young soldiers and sailors from multiple countries would die in battles over rocks and reefs that most people can't even find on a map. And by the time the world reacts to stop the fighting, it might already be too late. The South China Sea could become a Chinese lake, controlled by artificial islands bristling with missiles and protected by the world's largest navy. The balance of power in Asia would shift permanently, leaving America's allies isolated and vulnerable. So here's what we need to ask ourselves as we watch these events unfold in real time. Is China slowly taking control of the South China Sea through careful planning and patient pressure? Are they preparing for an inevitable conflict with the Philippines and its allies? Or is this just another phase of rising tension that will eventually calm down through diplomacy and compromise? The fishermen getting blocked from their traditional grounds don't think this tension will pass peacefully. The soldiers living on remote islands surrounded by Chinese ships don't believe in diplomatic solutions anymore. The military planners studying satellite images of new Chinese bases don't see any signs of Chinese restraint or compromise. But most importantly, if a conflict begins tomorrow, whether by accident or design, will the world be ready for the consequences? Will America really risk nuclear war to defend a few rocks in the South China Sea? Will China back down when faced with a united alliance, or will they double down on their expansion? The answer to that question might determine not just the future of the South China Sea, but the balance of power in the 21st century. And time is running out to find a peaceful solution before someone makes a mistake that changes everything forever.